If you look online for a guide on how to make a proper budget build for under 1,000 euros, chances are that they will recommend you get a 13th gen Intel Core i5, and that's actually a good recommendation. We'll see in depth later why. But what if I told you that the real trick to getting a very good build on is buying a 60 bucks weird cheap motherboard that comes straight from the depths of China from a brand called Huananzhi? Would you believe it? Well, I certainly wasn't sure, so I ordered one and made a PC with it. Let's see if it is good or not and how it came out. So first I will quickly list the specs, and then we will talk about the singular components and how you can build a similar one and what different choices you might want to make. So this PC came out with an i5 13400F, 32 gigs of DDR4 Pinnacle RGB RAM, the Huananzhi B660 motherboard, a Bitfenix Tracery RGB white case that's way too big for this build, and an RTX 3080 Ti from Inno3D. All of that coupled with a random Gen 4 1TB NVMe SSD, which nowadays don't cost anything at all, and with the new LC-Power LC6750M power supply, which we will see later on more in depth since they sent it to us for a review. Now this PC costs me under 1,000 euros, and you can actually build one for much cheaper because I way overspent on the Xilence cooler that's in there because it's a very good cooler and I want my PC to be silent, and on the case because again it's a very good case, but you don't have to spend that much money. So let's go over every single component, how it is and what you should do different. Now the motherboard is what you all have been waiting for, I guess. And now it comes in a very simple package, okay? It's definitely not like those Asus or Gigabyte boards. It has this simple cardboard box, and inside they give you an I/O shield, which surprisingly is not just gray and now it's black and it's like a bit painted. Then they give you a SATA cable, a single SATA cable, and a 3D printed socket cover. So this is what they give you. If we go over the board and take a look at it, it says it supports Gen 5 PCI Express on the 16 slot, and it has multiple NVMe slots. It just has 2 DDR4 slots, which might seem bad, but it's actually good because if it's just 2 slots, you can sustain higher frequency from longer. And it also comes with a BIOS that is modded in true Huananzhi fashion, where they hack old Xeons into boards that are not compatible. These boards come out of the box with support for 12th and 13th gen, so no need to flash the BIOS. And again, it will support DDR4 and all the latest tech regarding SSDs, but don't expect to find a USB-C connectivity port or to find extra connectivity slots, because it's very barebone, but it has everything you need. So the only question is, will it overheat when you're using it? Because on paper it looks amazing, but we will see that in the tests later on. So now let's move over to the CPU. Now we paired this board with an i5 13400F. Now if you're gonna buy one, and little spoiler, I honestly think you should, if you're ready to be able to work with some compromises, you should not pair this board with an unlocked CPU that will draw a lot of power, because as it was in the past, the real problem is the VRMs. So the VRMs are decent, they have a heatsink, the heatsink is very light, it's not the best, but they cannot support like an i7 13700K. You will fry your board. Even if it's gonna work today, it's not gonna work in a year from now. So we got a locked i5 that doesn't even have the integrated GPU, and this locked i5 I bought used for just 180 euros, but you can buy it new for like 200 bucks, it's fine. And it comes with 10 core, 16 threads, and it actually goes faster, I have tested it, than my i9 11900K that I have in my personal system. So this Chinese board, 60 to 80 bucks, depending on which one you get, with this, let's say 200 bucks CPU, so a total of 300 bucks combo, performs much better than my i9 11900K. And over here we have some, again, good, but nothing special RAM, some Pinnacle RGB RAM, which looks amazing, absolutely, but the performance is just your average DDR4 3600 MHz CL18 performance. Whereas on my build, I have like some G-Skill, Samsung BDI 3600 MHz CL14 stuff, and this thing still performs better than my personal PC. So the performance on the 13th gen is amazing. You should buy a 13th gen CPU for sure. Now, how do you cool it? Well, in this build we got this Xilence 240mm all-in-one cooler, which is absolutely insane in terms of noise. You cannot hear it at all, and the CPU stays at 60 degrees under Prime 95 small FFT tests. So it runs amazing. However, it is a bit more expensive. If you want to stay on a budget, and if you're getting a locked i5, I do recommend you get one of those Snowman AliExpress special coolers that Techie City always recommends, or really a general standard tower cooler. It's gonna be plenty for this CPU. You could also use the stock cooler if you want to. The stock cooler is actually gonna be fine if you wanna. Now, we discussed the RAM a bit, but really any DDR4 kit will do the job, but get some good looking RAM, because today it's cheap. Again, this Pinnacle stuff we have here, it's really gorgeous. I will put some B-roll, but it's really looking nice. And you can expect to pay just $100 for a 32GB kit of this stuff, so I do recommend it. Then, for the SSD, really get whatever you want to. Nowadays, 1TB Gen 3 SSD is $50. That's the best value. That's what I recommend for most people. If you want the Gen 4 stuff, get maybe a Lexar NVMe, which are cheaper. You don't need to buy the fancy Samsung ones, really, honestly. But again, Gen 3 is the best value for money as of right now. Not to mention SATA SSDs, they are literally throwing them at you basically for free. So it's nice. Now, let's discuss the case. You don't need a case. No, I'm kidding, but like really, you can save a ton of money on your PC. Don't buy an expensive case. Even this Tracery that we have here, I have a dedicated review for the Tracery. It looks extremely nice. It supports huge GPUs. You have huge expandability, so you don't risk having your GPU not fit. But it costs a bit more. You can go with like very entry-level case for this kind of build, honestly. But since the case is what you're gonna see most of the time, if you have the extra 50 to 60 bucks, I do recommend getting a good case like the one we have here. But if you want to really tighten the budget, you can do without. Power supply. Now they say never cheap out on your power supply, and it is indeed true. Especially if you're planning on upgrading your system in the future, and especially with how power hungry today GPUs are. And also, did you know that voltage filtering starts in the power supply and continues in your motherboard's VRMs? So the better your power supply you have, the less important is how much the board filters the voltage. You probably didn't, it's not that important, but basically, if you get a cheaper board but have a good power supply, you're gonna be better off. Don't get a cheaper board and a cheap power supply. Not gonna end well with good hardware, okay? Now, what we have here was sent to us by LC-Power. They have been a major player in the power supply industry for a while, but they have just now come back with a new design and a fully modular series, this new LC6M series, which looks very nice, is fully modular. It is 80 plus gold and comes at a very good price. So if you don't know what to choose, I do recommend them. If you want to go a bit cheaper, the entry level 80 plus white series from EVGA is probably the lowest I would go if you really want to stretch the budget, but I would recommend you get a good power supply, especially if you're planning on using a good GPU like we have today. So what's the GPU in there? Again, I anticipated it to you. It's an RTX 3080 Ti in 3D, but why should you buy that? Well, I do have a dedicated video discussing what's the best GPU to pair with a Ryzen 7 7700X. Now you might be wondering, why does that matter? Well, it's because this i5 can play any game at a high refresh rate and max settings, just like the Ryzen 7. Nowadays, 5 series CPU, be it an i5 or a Ryzen 5, is going to be plenty for gaming. So you can actually pair this i5 even with a 4070 Ti easily. But this RTX 3080 Ti goes faster than an RTX 4070. And guess what? I paid less for this GPU than I would pay for an RTX 4070 new. So if you can, get a used GPU, get a used 3080 or a used 3080 Ti. If you're on a very strict budget, get a used RTX 3070. If you get a 3070 and you do all the cheaper routes I told you on the rest of the build, you can put this PC together for something like 700 euros. I have actually run the number and made up a shopping list. So really, you have plenty of options there, and with a good power supply, tomorrow you can swap out the 3070 for a 3080 Ti or for a 3090. Now the 3080 Ti is a better buy than the 3090 because people see the 80 Ti instead of the 90 and think it's a worse card, but it's not. So it's usually cheaper, around $100 cheaper in my country, so I do recommend it as well. Now, with all the reasoning said, let's go over the performance and the benchmarks, and especially the temperatures on the VRM of this board. Will it overheat? Well, it actually didn't. Even on Prime 95, the board was staying with the VRM's temperature in check completely. We've already discussed how the CPU was running extremely quiet. I will also put the thermal test as I'm speaking and show you the CPU-Z results, as well as run a proper fire strike to show you both the synthetic performance of the CPU and of the GPU. We then played Apex Legends, and this PC can play it at 240 Hz, locked. Would you believe that? That's nice. It can also play Warzone at over 200 FPS on average, with competitive settings obviously, which is a blend of low and high view distance basically. On Fortnite 2 you can max the 240 Hz target, which is very nice, and this PC can actually even handle high resolution gaming. You can play at 1440p easily, even up to 165 Hz with really no problem, and without really using the LSS unless you're playing Cyberpunk. So I'm really happy with the performance. Now do let me know, guys, have you ever tried one of these Chinese boards? I did try a couple for Xeons in the past and they were slightly overheating, so it looks like with their new mainstream board they've made it much better. And also do let me know if you have any more suggestions on how to build a budget gaming PC for cheap, buying parts online. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.